evening, fellow gamers. Retro Knight here. I'm going to be exploring 4 video games that I thoroughly enjoy out of 4 different systems and one that I just cannot stand. Here we go. Let's start with our first section, Mega Man 3. A personal favorite of mine. Many of you may have grown up with Mega Man 2. I grew up with Mega Man 3. I have it here, not complete, unfortunately, but I do have the manual, which is very nice. It's the 3rd installment of Mega Man in the series. It features Magnet Man, Hard Man, Top Man, Shadow Man, Spark Man, Snake Man, Gemini Man, and Needle Man. It added many new features to the game that are now staples of the game, including his slide and the addition of RC, his faithful hound, which stands for Rush Coil. But after a while, you beat some of the other robot masters. You can get RJ for Rush Jet and RM for Rush Marine. It was also the first appearance of Breakman, which you later find out at the end is actually Proto Man, Mega Man's brother. Now, the reason why I happen to like Mega Man 3, I think it's very underrated. I actually just recently watched a video that Mega Man 3 was probably the alpha build of a new Mega Man game that got released because of the success of Mega Man 2. And I could almost believe that. There's actually a lot of glitches in Mega Man 3 that are exploitable that don't soft lock the game, which is good, but I still think it's a great game. And this is not, unfortunately, my original copy. But the reason why I grew up with Mega Man 3 instead of Mega Man 2, I didn't get a chance to play Mega Man 2 until I was much older. Mega Man 3 was the only Mega Man game that was available for rent at the local grocery store up the road from my parents' house. And once I rented it, I fell in love with the series. And I thought to myself, well, if this is the 3rd one, there's got to be other ones. I looked for other places. And we only had a couple of rental stores in my town. So in the 80s. And they had Mega Man 3. And that's how I fell in love with the series. I have properly actually only beaten this game about twice. I've done many numerous things with Game Genies on it, but I grew up with it, and that's why I like Mega Man 3 on the NES as my first love. For our second adventure, we have another love of mine. One of the first games that I bought with my own money. I bought it at Media Play, if that tells you how far back that goes. Final Fantasy III. In Japan, they got Final Fantasy VI. It was the 3rd installment here in America, in the North Americas. Released April 2nd, 1994. Programmed by Ken Notara. Published by Square at the time. Riding on the coattails of Final Fantasy II, which is also an amazing game. Final Fantasy III was what I finally bought. I have it here in a universal case with the manual in the box. So it's not clearly complete, but I got it with the manual and I like the case, so it works for me. It's an amazing story about a mystical girl named Terra that goes on adventures in an industrial world, fantasy world, but used to know magic a long time ago. And her adventures on defeating a very powerful evil. It's one of the only games that I actually own a walk guide through, and it's great. And I still actually have yet to finish the game. Almost every time something happens, the last time something happened, I ended up selling all of my games, like we do when we're young. And I got it back a long time ago, and I sit down and play it occasionally. I get a little bit further, and I would actually like to be able to finish this game. But finishing this game is almost sad because in the process of finishing this game, it would mean that I would have nothing new left to find out about it. Fantastic game. Final Fantasy III, aka Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo. And our third slot, Streets of Rage 2 for the Sega Game Gear. Many of you, I don't know, you may or may not have played the original, but I had a Sega Game Gear. Unfortunately, this is not my original model. This is now a recapped, nicer model that I have. I'm currently going for a record on this game, and I have to work with original hardware. So with that, I had to get that, and I love this game. I had it when I was younger because I had a Game Gear. It was released in August of 1993. It's a powerhouse of a beat 'em up on the Sega Game Gear, and it really does the Game Gear well, despite being an 8-bit system. For a system that didn't age well, it still plays very well for what it is. It continues the story of Axel, Blaze, and Adam's little brother Skate on their way to defeat the Syndicate and Mr. X, who mysteriously survived the prequel in Streets of Rage 1. The Game Gear version actually does a couple of things that the Sega Genesis version, which I have back over here somewhere, doesn't do. There are some super attacks, and there's a couple of extra special moves if you have the manual that you can understand how to do on the Game Gear version. And it's very playable. It's got a lot of replayability, and I like it, and I'm currently trying to go for a world record on it right now. And for our final installment, we have Dragon Crystal on the Sega Master System. A few of you may have seen me do a cleaning of this game a couple of videos ago, where I talked a little bit about it. It was released in Europe and Australia, not in the States, in 1991. Unfortunately, all I have is the game. I don't have the manual. I printed the manual, but I do have the box, which is very nice. My copy came from Melbourne, Australia, a gentleman named Jason. It was produced by Sega. It's this overhead, top-down, maze-like adventure game where you fight monsters, you collect weapons, swords, armors, scrolls, rings, rods, all this magical equipment, and you defeat these monsters in this maze-like setting. But by the end, you actually start defeating some dragons when you reach level 30. This flies definitely under the radar of most gamers. This is a very, very nice game. It was developed very well because years later, this came out in 1991. We're in 2023. That's 32 years ago. And I'm still playing this game because it's got fantastic replayability. Because every single time you load everything up, it's all randomized. When you encounter a scroll or a rod or a potion for the first time, it'll say red ring or blue potion or green rod. And you don't know what it does this time around until you use it. Then after you use it, then it labels it with its name, which totally lends to the replayability of it. I had this on the Sega Game Gear when I was growing up as a boy. And now I have it on the Master System, and I think it plays a little bit better on the Master System. I like it on the Master System. And it's just phenomenal. It's difficult, but it's fun and replayability. I think I've beaten I think I mentioned that in the other video. I've beaten this twice for real. And it is ridiculously difficult. And it takes a while. So much fun. Despite all these games behind me, and for those of you who know the rest of our channels, I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons since I was 12. That was back in 1992. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dragonstrike. This game is just so disappointing. There's so much more they could have done with this. I'm just so damn disappointed. Heroes of the Lance, it's okay. It could be better. Pool of Radiance, that's how you do a D&D game on the NES. It did it so well. Almost exactly a recreation of the computer game. This is a glorified shooter. A glorified space shooter, but you play as a dragon. Very few games in my NES collection that I didn't want to have to buy. Dragonstrike is one of them. Because I'm going for a complete NES set. I bought it, I've played it twice, and it sits. I'm not even that crazy about it. And that's how we do things. Unfortunately, some games, they just don't turn out like we want them to. You guys take it easy. Keep gaming.